For those who are here early, we've got a little clip, so a special treat for our early birds, and then we'll get started with our crisis jam. So I think a short 2.5 minute video here.
Air Force psychiatrist when I was at Wilford Hall. What was it that she did that helped you begin to heal? I hear it a lot. She taught me that who I was not just Marine. I had this label I gave myself. I'm tough. I'm the toughest guy in the room. That illusion got shattered, and then I felt like I was left with nothing. And now my only label was broken. And she showed me that didn't have to be my label. It began with talking about that little boy who liked to write in a diary. A couple of nights after we had that conversation, I still wasn't well. I'm in a coffee shop, and I started to have this hallucination. Now, one of my triggers, a trigger is just a bad memory that seared in your brain. And for years, one of my triggers was the weather, because my crash was when it was like hot and stormy outside and whatnot. And so for years after, the right humidity, right heat, right clouds in the sky, I'd feel myself getting anxious and nervous. So I'm in this coffee shop, and I start feeling that way. And all of a sudden, it was like the storm's breaking out in front of me. And in that moment, I think to myself, okay, what do I do? Well, I could do what I would normally do, which is go back to my room and get the gun I kept and put it to my head. Or, what would that little boy do? What would that little boy that, me and the doctor had talked about? He'd write something, wouldn't he? So I asked the waitress for something to write with. I grabbed a napkin and I said this poem almost as quickly as I'm going to say it to you. Took a storm to crack the mortar, the stone, the aged clay, the walls I'd built to shield myself from rains I feared to face. Took a storm to clear the rubble, the remnants of my home, to find the lost foundation poured before I dwelt alone. And today, I think I'll swim. I think I'll swim. I think I'll live. I don't want to die. And it meant living.
For those who joined us early, what a treat, what a way to kick off our crisis jam with this bonus content from Moving America's Soul on Suicide. So thank you. What a powerful story, what a powerful poem. Well, welcome for those who are just joining us on the hour here. I'm Lindsay Browning. I am the host for today's Crisis Jam, and I am with the National Association of Medicaid Directors. Some of you have probably seen me here before hosting these, but really thrilled to be back for today's conversation. We had planned to have Fountain House on today as the featured presentation, but unfortunately Arvind had a family emergency, so we were going to have them back, and we have a different focus for today. We're going to hear from David Covington and some of his colleagues who worked on Moving America's Soul on Suicide. So really excited to dig into that and hear more about that project today. So I think we can go ahead and move forward. So just a couple of reminders as we kick off today's conversation. You can continue to go to talk.crisisnow.com to access all of the materials from the weekly Crisis Jam calls. So you can see what's coming next. You can look at previous recordings. Next slide, please. And see, for example, last week's conversation which focused on LGBTQ plus individuals and 988. So be sure to bookmark the website, check it out, and you can download the calendar appointment from there as well. Next slide. We'd like to continue to remind folks of what's our top five most popular crisis jam calls. The youth edition, the special edition, continues to surpass all of the others. This is the most watched crisis jam call, followed by the special edition when 988 went live. So you can check those out either on the website or you can go directly to the YouTube channel by scanning the QR code here. Next slide. And we have another special edition coming up in July with Monica Johnson, who leads the 988 coordinating office to celebrate the first birthday of 988, and hoping we can surpass all of those other numbers I shared on the previous slide and have a great turnout for that celebratory birthday call, so to speak. Next slide. Folks can continue to go to the SAMHSA store to get materials to promote 988, stickers, magnets, information in different languages. So be sure to check that out, and in particular that partner toolkit. Next slide. And as always, the 988 shirts continue to be available. You can purchase those, or the other way to get it is to volunteer for being in the trivia hot seat. So I know many folks have done that, and we're always, Karen's always looking for more volunteers for that. Next slide. Speaking of trivia hot seat, we are actually going to start with that today. Because this question tees up really nicely our featured presentation from David Covington. So I'm going to invite Denny Morrison to come on camera and join us here. Denny is the former Chief Clinical Officer at NetSmart and is an independent consultant. So Dennis, thank you so much for being willing to be in the hot seat today.
Thanks.
All right, so
I was happy to abuse myself.
Good. I will tee up the question. So the question here is, what was going through her mind? This is a question that plagues survivors. In the book Myths About Suicide, Dr. Thomas Joyner tackles many misperceptions that have become commonplace about suicide. So according to Dr. Joyner, which of the following is not a myth? So in other words, another way to say this is, which of these is something that Dr. Joyner would say is true? So the first option is suicide is easy escape, action, cowardice, use. Suicide is active anger, aggression, or revenge. Suicide deaths don't occur on impulse, or option D, most who die don't make future plans. So again, which of the following is not a myth according to Dr. Joyner?
I think it's C.
Okay. Invite our audience to help out, Dennis. See if we can confirm.
Can I buy a vowel?
You can buy a vowel. Right. All right, here's what we've got. So Dennis, it seems like folks agree with you. We've got the majority of folks saying option C is not a myth. So let's turn to our answer. Yes, you are correct. So Dr. Joyner believes it's a myth that people often die by suicide on a whim. Those who struggle with unfathomable emotional pain have thought about death and the act of suicide many times. And I think what the takeaway for me is this means we have opportunity to intervene and support individuals who may be struggling. So yeah, great job.
Thanks. Yeah, to me, what made me think about that was that, that's kind of like the core reason for doing harm reduction planning with people if they have firearms in the home, because they will act on an impulse, and if you can avoid that impulse, you have a good chance of intervening and getting them to a point where they can think a little better.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the quote kind of follows on from that trivia question, and the quote is from William Styron's book Darkness Visible, and it says, "The argument I put forth was fairly straightforward. The pain of severe depression is quite unimaginable to those who have not suffered it, and it kills in many instances because its anguish can no longer be borne. The prevention of many suicides will continue to be hindered until there is general awareness of the nature of this pain. Most people survive depression, but to those who die by suicide, there should be no more reproof attached than to the victims of terminal cancer." It beautifully said, and I think speaks again perfectly to the conversation we're about to have, to the feature presentation we're about to have with David Covington around Moving America's Soul on Suicide, of really busting the stigma and helping to tell the stories of those who have struggled with suicidal ideation. So David, with that, I would love to turn it over to you. to kick it off and welcome your fellow panelists.
Thanks so much, Lindsay, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about these stories. So William Styron suggested that this experience was indecipherable to those who haven't been there. And it was our view that to really move a crisis system in the US that's going to make a difference, we need to have more than just the opportunity of 988 or mobile crisis services or facility services. We need to have a public who understands with compassion and care the opportunity and need to engage and intervene, because a lot of the way our system is set up now with police and detainment in hospitals really comes from the myths that Thomas leads into. And Thomas, one of the themes that really goes through this series is the concept of connection and contribution. I asked you one time whether or not those themes were universal, and you referenced Freud's concept of love and work and talked about all the philosophers. Talk a little bit about, Thomas, this theme through the stories and the importance of these stories to helping shift the nation's perceptions about suicide.
Well, thank you, David. As some of you know, I'm an academic psychologist. I'm also a clinical psychologist, so I spend a fair amount of time pondering the depths of human nature. What makes up human nature? And I think mattering and feeling connected or feeling like you belong are fundamental pillars of human nature. And as long as both of those pillars are standing and are robust, then everything else is icing on the cake, and everything else is just kind of a bonus. However, if either or both of those pillars is cracked, or if it's broken, or if it's ruined, well, then humans just don't function well. And I'm far from the only one who thinks that. Many people who have pondered human nature come to those themes over and over and over. It makes sense because that's who we are. Those are the, in my view anyway, the two main pillars of our very essence, of our very nature. We need those things attended to be healthy. If they're not attended to, we're not healthy. And that informs what you do with people who are suicidal. They're in pain, the kind of pain that William Styron talked about in his book, Darkness Visible. It's a fantastic book, by the way. I highly recommend it for anybody who hasn't read it. That kind of pain can be lessened or even remedied by feeling a little bit more like you matter and feeling a little bit more like you belong.
And Thomas, before 1990, we just didn't have many of those kinds of stories informing our understanding of suicide. And following the publication of William Styron's book, we started to see more individuals. In the late 90s, Dr. DeQuincy Lazine, who's been in this call, Heidi Bryan, began to talk publicly. Dr. Lazine wrote a book about his experience. And then we started to see many others, certainly in this community: Terry Wise, Eduardo Vega, Kevin Hines, Kara Anna, websites, storytelling, movies about their experience. Desiree Stage brought photographs and ultimately a movie with the S word, C.W. Tillman. And in 2012, Marsha Linehan came out about her own. We knew her as the researcher behind DBT, but we did not know about her own lived experience. And those stories really have shifted our understanding in ways that exactly that quote from William Styron suggested. So I approached Justin Shelby and Dr. Joyner about making a film series to tell 9 stories. And Justin, you and I've traveled all over the country as we have done these 9 visits, starting back in 2020 during COVID. This is you in the lower left in a small counseling office where Tanja and her therapist brought us into their sacred space. Justin, talk a little bit about what you've hoped to bring to this series and what you've gotten from these storytellers.
Yeah, well, I kind of, in my mind, I kind of just brought like a layman's ear, I guess. Like I don't come from a clinical background or anything like that. So I'm kind of viewing this as how I want the audience to view it, like the average American, I guess. And in terms of learning, like that trip with Thomas, like that was pretty incredible, like getting that much psychological background to what these people are going through, kind of filling in what I anticipated in the rest of these interviews. But from the interviews themselves, like sitting down with Silouan and Tanja in this very private setting was pretty insane. I saw like there's like this treasure trove, I guess, of information from these people who have had these experiences that like you can't get anywhere else. Like they're saying these things that while I'm filming that, like it just kind of blows my mind that they've had the ability to go through these experiences and to say these things that are just absolutely incredible, that could help people who maybe don't have the time to think of it themselves, like people who are going through these experiences. And I'm hopefully just capturing as much as I possibly can so that we can help as many people as we can.
And Justin, one of the keys is your background is filmmaking. Your background is not behavioral health or suicide prevention. So we didn't want someone in our space sort of putting forth, because we're all, shaped by our impressions and beliefs. And we just wanted to tell these stories. And we wanted to do so with a unique arc, that we don't start with a suicide attempt with any of these stories. We start with the strength, the resiliency of the individual. That's the first third of the story. The second third of the story is what happened to them, what occurred, and the suicide attempt or ideation that followed. And then the last third of that story is the way forward, whether that's thriving or surviving or grinding or whatever it is. It's the recovery and the move forward. And all of this really came, and I think he may jump on for a minute, from Silouan Green. But while we're waiting for him, I see Kevin Berthia. Kevin, it looks like you're in the vehicle. And Kevin, actually, it was telling your story that started the impact in your own life. Kevin, in a couple of minutes, tell the story of being in New York City on that stage. How many years after your attempt was that, Kevin?
That was 8 years after my attempt. I had the opportunity to be reunited with Officer Briggs in New York in May of, coming on 10 years from now. It was 10-year anniversary from now, but that was literally 8 years after I went to the bridge, 22 years old. And it was just, it just completely changed my dynamic of how I looked at that day. I still hadn't accepted anything that occurred that day. I still hadn't dealt with the emotions that brought me to that day. So actually being able to have the opportunity to speak openly for the first time in front of a room who openly with open arms while I was, vulnerable, and told that story of everything that led up to that day was completely changed my life. And I always will be grateful for that night. Kevin,
you and Justin and I went back to the bridge together. You had not been back to the bridge when we filmed, and talk a little bit about that experience and the life that you're living moving forward.
Yeah, it's just the opportunity to go back to and realize what you overcome. And it was just very, very impactful for me. Now I get the opportunity to travel around this country and just share my lived experience with other people who are struggling in that dark place, and just give them that hope and understanding that they can too get out of that thing. They can live and they can thrive and live well through these things. And we deserve to see it get better. So my motto will always be the same. And I just thank you for the opportunity to share my story.
Thank you, Kevin. So I don't see Silouan yet on, but I want to say that when we first sat down, this was in early 2020, right in the height of the pandemic. I remembered something Silouan had said. I had met him in a presentation in Kentucky in 2014. And this is, if you saw the video at the beginning, if you were here a minute early, Silouan was a Marine, always sort of saw himself as the toughest person in the room. He saw himself that way because he was, and was involved in a tragic plane crash that led to the death of his partner and injuries that ultimately led to him being discharged from the Marines, and struggled mightily. And he had used the phrase, anyone can get broken. And I think ultimately that phrase really, for me, was the whole thing. The strongest person, he won a competition in the Marines in 1994. His name is on that trophy, that decathlon looking trophy for the Marines. Looked down on people having a mental health day, if you will. And all of that changed. And he realized anyone can get broken. And boy, for me, that really underpins what we're trying to get at through this whole initiative. So we reached out to Silouan. He ultimately joined us. And for me, I thought I wanted to make sure there was someone in the film that any man could look at and say, boy, if that could happen to him, it could happen to me. But I also wanted the same for all the women who would be watching this. And we did talk to some military leaders who've gone through this who are female, but it felt like a better example would be, we talked to Terry Wise, a Boston trial attorney, before her husband was diagnosed with ALS, and she's written and done films about. But ultimately, we included Allie in our, as the ninth video, which we're publishing today, tomorrow. And Allie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Allie, before we talk to you, let me just show about a minute clip from your video, and then we'll come back to you.
I was so tired. I still felt so nauseous. I had a throbbing headache, and they kept trying to, ask you questions. I still felt so nauseous. I had a throbbing headache, and they kept trying to, ask you questions and intake information. And then once all of the intake was done, I had to say goodbye to my parents. And because I couldn't walk, they brought me a walker. And, I don't even think that it had clicked that, what was going on. It just kind of happened so fast. I woke up, I was transitioned here. I don't think it had set in. But walking down this hallway was the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life. Anytime I ever go through anything hard, I think about that hallway, and I think about walking down it, and I remember that anger starting to set in, that, why am I still here? Why do I have to do this? I was so angry at myself in that moment because I was here because I was unsuccessful. And I think that was the first time that I realized that I was still going to have to live life. And that hallway was my first challenge of living. There's
Allie, I think I first approached you in 2020 about doing this film with us. And your first answer was no. I think your second answer 6 months later was no. Talk a little bit about why you weren't initially wanting to join us.
So I live a very public life. I am a motivator, personal trainer, and running coach for women all over the country. And, I felt like my job was to be the cheerleader, the motivator, this happy-go-lucky person that never had anything wrong in her life, because I was there to support other women. And as I was going throughout my career, I realized that the way that we connected with people was not by all the positive things in our life, but from all the hard things that we have been through. And, whether or not that you've gone through a suicide attempt or you've had the suicide ideation, we've all gone through hard things. So when we can tell our stories of overcoming hard strengths and the moments that we've had to find strength,
that's where we start to connect with people. And that's where we start to grow and make changes and better our lives. And that's why I have slowly over the years gotten more comfortable with telling my story, because if it just inspires one person to take that next step forward, it's worth it.
Yeah, so Allie, the title of the video that we're publishing today is Fearless. And for me, I was knew of your suicide attempt when it occurred, and you brought the same fearlessness to that pain in your life as you bring to the work that you're doing today. But it was ultimately a Facebook post about a year ago, or maybe a little less, where I saw that you had medaled in I think it was a 30 miles, 60 obstacle Spartan event. You were one of the top finalists. And I wrote you and said something along the lines of, would be great to have you in this video series. So talk about having done it now, what your reflections are on the other end.
I mean, that Spartan race, I came in first, and it was one of those moments where you have to dig deep, right? You just showed the video about the hallway. When I am going through these races and I am miserable and I am hating life and I wonder why I put myself in these situations, I think about that hallway. And if I can walk down that hallway, I can accomplish anything, right? And when you mentioned that to me, I realized that is a story that is so powerful, and that it was time to start sharing the story. And I had all of this fear, like people are going to judge me, people are going to think that I was weak, and the complete opposite, right? It is so nice to know that, people relate to your story. People look up to those that have gone through hard things and have come out on the other side. And to be able to inspire people, it's been incredible to kind of be on the other side of that. It's been a journey, but it's nice to be on the other side.
And Allie, Justin, Tanja, Miles, Kevin, and Silouan will be joining us at the National Council in a couple of weeks to do a session about the series. You won't be joining us. Can you share why you won't be joining us?
I will be about 32 weeks pregnant at the time of the event. So unless David wants to deliver my baby, I think it might be best that I stay home on this one.
So let's show. So before you got into Spartan races and became competitive, the very first time was your father had been a marathon runner, and you at first decided this was a good idea. I'm going to show a brief clip, and then we'll come back. And if Silouan has joined us, then we'll talk to him briefly. Otherwise, Justin, you and I will talk about going to that Silouan visit.
There's no award for washing dishes or doing laundry, so I'm gonna go get a medal for doing something really hard. I remember at mile 23 crying to my husband saying, "This is not fun. This is the worst thing I have ever done. Why did I do this to myself?" There was a woman that was volunteering for the race that had the sponge of icy cold water, and she wrung it out on the back of my neck, and it was so cold and such a shock to my system that I stopped crying. I stood up, and I just remember running as fast as I could with my limping leg to the finish line. I have spent so many years hating myself. That was the first time I had ever been proud of myself, that I set a goal and stuck with it, and I crossed the finish line, and I got a medal, and my mom was there, and my husband was there. I think one of the big things for healing is being able to look forward to something, goals, dreams.
So we'll stop it there, Allie. For me, the conclusion where we do get to one of your Spartan races and you tie this to some of the pain and struggle that you've had in your life is really the highlight. But we'll look to people to go to the YouTube channel to see that. Justin, your reflections on the very first video we visited, and these storytellers, they've told us about their lives, their suffering, their courage. What did you take away from the visit to Silouan and his family?
Well, I'd say from an editing perspective, I learned to edit from the end of the story and then kind of go back to the beginning, just because, you know, there's some heavy stuff there, and it was tough the first time. I was surprised what I was getting myself into. So I kind of edit from the big happy ending, not that it's an ending, but, you know, the ending of the story, and then coming back and filling it in from the middle. But from the trip itself, I think it was that park visit with the van when we were meeting his family, and they were all climbing out of the van, and it didn't stop. There was more and more people coming out of that van that are all these, you know, these people in his life that are making it worth living, and that was pretty incredible to see.
Yeah, so we met Thekla and Silouan. Silouan had been leaving that small town where the Marine base was, gosh, now 25, 30 years ago, and had determined he had bought a motorcycle and was driving somewhere perhaps off into somewhere in where no one was, and he would end his life, or he wouldn't. He didn't know. But as he was leaving town, he ran into this woman that he had met one time before, and told her that he was going off to see the country. He didn't tell her about his other idea. And ultimately, she took a semester off from college, joined him, and they have, how many children do they have now, Justin?
Oh gosh, I lost count. I think it's 9. Is it 9 kids?
Thomas, just as you reflect on these now 9 stories, what are your thoughts on what the lived experience tells us? Again, we started with the quote from William Styron that it's for the public to put our arms around this if we haven't been there personally, or we have been there and we don't want to talk about it because of stigma and discrimination. What do you think these stories do for us?
I think they are universal stories, truly. And those of us who are doing the work from the so-called ivory tower, we have universal experiences too. And I think our work, as scholarly and scientific as it may be, actually corroborates and jibes very well with the lived experience that is so vivid and so moving and inspirational that runs throughout each of these 9 stories. It's a wonderful compliment to the scholarly and scientific work, because it makes it very accessible, very personal, very human. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, David.
So thanks so much to Allie and Kevin and Justin and Dr. Joyner for joining us. I wanted to spend a little bit more time with Allie today. She's not going to be able to be with us at the National Council. Silouan, Kevin Berthia, and Tanja Miles will be with Justin and I for that.
David, I'm here.
Oh, Silouan. So Silouan, we've only got about a minute left, but
can I say something real quick?
Yeah, we started with the concept of anyone can get broken, and you became our partner on putting this video series out.
Yeah, I just want to say it is awesome to be part of this. And, you know, one thing that I can tell you that motivates me, like right now I'm in Seattle talking to a bunch of firefighters. And I think the biggest problem I see in mental health is because this isn't normal, because historically things get dealt with after there's a big problem, is that we don't have enough people making it normal to talk about mental health. It's why in a lot of ways, I call it mental fitness. You know, it's a lot easier to lose 10 pounds than 100 pounds. And I think until we change people's attitudes to make talking about and dealing with mental health part of your life, long before you think you're going to need it, we're going to kind of keep being frustrated on the way things are going. But I know firsthand, dealing with these firefighters, that if you talk about it the correct way, if you show them this could be anybody, if you show them and give them some tools to be stronger, people respond to it. And I really think that that's going to be one of the results of this project.
Thanks so much, Silouan. I know you were jumping out of that. Silouan's Anyone Can Get Broken started it off for us. And for us, Allie, your video brought it home with Anyone Can Come Back. So Lindsay, thanks so much for the opportunity to share. And I hope some of you will join us at National Council to go into this in a little more depth.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you again to Allie, Silouan, and Kevin for sharing your stories. I think just so powerful to hear the words of hope and the incredible job of busting the stigma so that all of us can talk about mental health, talk about these struggles and give hope to other people. So thank you so much. I want to shift gears and move into some of our standing crisis jam agenda items and move to the SAMHSA update. So Dr. Anita Everett is joining us today for that update. So I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. All right. So thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. Our SAMHSA is, we are one SAMHSA, a fairly good sized organization. And I know we're typically represented by folks that are directly in our 988 coordinating office. However, we thought today that I might provide to you a little bit of information about what our role in, and I work as the director of the Center for Mental Health Services, which is a component of SAMHSA, what we've done and what will be continuing to do to support the general broad area of crisis services development per se. And I did want to sort of also take a minute to thank the folks who spoke about their lived experience as suicide survivors. Certainly that is part of the focus of the crisis system. Having an effective crisis system, those of us who work in this space firmly believe will help us reduce the number of suicide attempts and actual deaths by suicide, which we aren't doing so well with statistically, as all of us are aware, in that we have gradually increasing numbers of suicide nationally every year. It seems like for the last several years. So we're working on that. We're part of that. So let's see. So just want to talk a little bit about SAMHSA. We're about 31 years old. We have many components. One of our main things is grant administrations. Let's go on to the next slide. I'm going to go through these really quickly, then I'm presenting these more as an idea or a reference with the knowledge that anyone can access these slides later. We do throughout SAMHSA, we work with that three-point structure, the someone to talk to, someone to respond, and a place to go. We believe all three of those elements are important. For us in CMHS, the Center for Mental Health Services, again, we add in a fourth component when we think about this, because we know sometimes those three layers aren't by themselves enough for certain people who have ongoing concerns or ongoing needs for treatment and or other community supports. They can be natural supports, friends, support groups, other sorts of things, and or professional help through a CCBHC or a community mental health provider. Next slide. One of the main things that we administer in my part of SAMHSA is the mental health block grant. And just to let you know, every state receives money for mental health block grant funding. So if you are an advocate or involved in some way, you should be aware that your state mental health authority does receive money for us. Over the last 2 years, we've had a set aside as a part of the mental health block grant that this year is 5% of the total amount that's allocated to a state. The president's budget for the 2024 budget, which is currently in deliberation by Congress, has in it up a 10% set aside, which we are firmly support as giving more enduring support. One of the good things about the block grant is it's fairly stable and fairly enduring. So it's not a short-term grant. Typically, it's a long-term enterprise, and it gives states the opportunity to build up certain elements where they need. And so we've seen, these are some of the results from our first 2 years of support through the mental health block grant. So we see there, if you go to that second dot down, mobile crisis units, for instance, that we now have on record having 1,200 mobile health crisis teams that have been developed in the last couple of years as a result of or stimulated by the mental health block grant set aside funding. We're also seeing the buildup of short-term crisis stabilization services, and they come about in various formats. In total, over the last 2 years, the set aside itself has been just under $200 million. So it's not a small amount of money. Let's go on to the next slide. We have a number of different other ways that we support the work, and you probably recognize some of these documents. I do have links to the document as a final slide, but these are things that have been largely supported through the Center for Mental Health Services, different activities that we've engaged with. We have, in addition to documents that we provide, we have a number of learning collaboratives which have been supported that support crisis services. We are working on the last word there. We are working on a policy academy this summer, which will be coming up, that gives an opportunity for counties to do crisis mapping at the county level. A lot of what we do with the state block grant funding goes to the states, but we also recognize that counties have a related but somewhat different role and different responsibilities there. And then the part that I have, I probably put this out of order, but the part that I have there on the TTI, or the Transformation Transfer Initiative, is an arrangement that we have through NASHPD, the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors, which is a co-lead in this enterprise, the Crisis Jam, which is supported ultimately by CMHS funds. We have supported a number of states to specifically look at a number of activities, and I have a little bit more detail in a future slide. So let's go on to the next slide. Just want to let you know that there's a variety of different ways that we support this. So in 2023, these are some examples of the funding, the way that states have used this TTI funding. Again, we administer this through NASHPD. So if you work at the state level or in a state that you know has needs, work with your state mental health authority on putting in an application to NASHPD for these grants. So crisis workforce development, there's a listing there of states and territories that received a small, $250,000 each to support crisis services workforce development. The next column over, you see the subject area of crisis services that serve under-resourced or minority communities. And that listing of states there, if you're in one of those states, hopefully you've seen some activity around that supports crisis workforce development that's specifically oriented towards service to under-resourced or minority communities. Timely access to community-based mental health services, that we think that's very important component for many individuals that call and or receive mobile crisis services and or go to a stabilization center. Many of those individuals do need aftercare, and this particular column of activities here with these states was designed to create to work with clinics to have them create opportunities like walk-in style clinics or same day, next day style appointment making for individuals who need care. Because we know if you wait a long period of time beyond 5 days, it's much less likely that a person will actually show up, which means oftentimes that they go back to the state they were in before the whole crisis scenario that they were in. We also had some funding that was set aside for the development of children and adolescents crisis services. And this is the second or third year that we've had that one through this. And so many states have taken this up on the opportunity to pursue workforce development in children in crisis workforce development. Next slide. This is just a listing of some of the other examples, really, more or less, and I won't go through all of these, but we've seen a lot of things that have used this again, back to the block grant funding, that have built up 24-hour respite units, technology. They've used it as one-time purchasing of technology that supports crisis services development for 988 call center support itself, training for first responders, peer integration into crisis teams, improving processes for warm handoffs, CCBHC expansion, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, and then crisis residential services. Next slide. This is just a slide to sort of remind us, this isn't one example in one state. I don't know if there's folks on from Missouri or not today, but they had some development of crisis services already, largely because Missouri is an example of a state that has really pretty expanded CCBHC, these certified community behavioral health clinic services, which include crisis services as a required element. But they've had enough experience and identified a need in a specialized forensic mobile team development. And so I've done that and used some of their mental health block grant crisis set aside funding to do that. Next slide. The next slide also is an example. This is a reminder to all of us that United States also includes territories. And American Samoa is an example of a territory. They also are recipients of block grant and have that 5% set aside requirement. Because they're a low population, they don't get very much money from us. But with that, they've used it extremely well. And so if you go back to look at these slides and you touch on the little thing there that looks like a trumpet bell with a sound coming out of it, it's actually an ad that they broadcast across American Samoa about 988 and calling 988 and what 988 is useful for. That's very aligned with the way we message about 988 at this point in time. So just a reminder that these territories are part of the United States. Next slide. Next slide. We do have a new series of grants that are mobile community crisis response grants. These are 4-year grants that are up to $750,000 a year. This also, for this first year, our total amount was $10 million, but we have in the president's budget, we've requested that be increased, and the decision was made to put that as a double. So we'll be having many more grant opportunities that are specifically designed to support catalyze the development or capital cost for the development of mobile crisis teams. And that would be something to look out for. And we'd love to have a lot of, robust applications for that. Next slide. I believe this is just about my final slide. So another way that we, as part of the continuum of crisis services, oftentimes does involve ready and willing outpatient care. And this is a reminder that one of the things that we have spent a lot of effort on lately, and Congress has been quite interested in, so our funding for the CCBHC development has gone up considerably. It's now over a $200 million program just for us, which is a lot for us. And we're working very closely with CMS to assure that the CCBHCs can be funded appropriately longer term. Many states have set aside special cost-based funding arrangements through their Medicaid plan to fund CCBHCs, very much akin to how community health centers in the health sector or primary care centers are funded, which is a wonderful model that gives a lot of opportunities. The CCBHC model, in my mind, I have the picture there of President Kennedy, because this year we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of the original signing of the Community Mental Health Center Services Act, which was passed in 1963 and signed into law almost immediately before the unfortunate situation, of course, of our president being assassinated. But part of his dream was to have a fully developed community-based clinic setting that could work with individuals across a spectrum of mental illnesses and serve as a viable alternative to inpatient care or institutionalization. And in my mind, this CCBHC model, which is, we have over 500 clinics, CCBHCs, and that's actually an underestimate across our country right now, and they're growing every day as we speak. This CCBHC model really is the first national attempt that we've had that provides nationally agreed upon standards for what constitutes a really good outpatient care. There are required elements, and we've just recently released, which is to the link down there, criterion for them which are updated. What you see there in the peach are two things that are directly relevant of the required services that are directly relevant to the 988 and crisis services enterprise. And those are crisis services themselves are a required element to become certified as a CCBHC. And we also require responsive outpatient mental health services, responsive and accessible. And what we mean by that, many clinics manifest that by having same day or walk-in style clinic settings, but we require, or our accreditation or certification requirements say that it can be no longer than 10 days. We'd like to have that shorter, but that was what we deduced at the time was reasonable. And so we do. So in other words, if you're working with someone in a mobile unit or even a crisis stabilization style unit, and they need outpatient care, and you work with a CCBHC, the latest that should be is 10 working days after the time that you've requested the person that you're working with, the client or patient, have requested outpatient services. So we believe this is a wonderful model, and we value support everywhere we can to have this go as far as possible. It has a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of really strong congressional and several of the last iterations of presidents have been very supportive of this. beginning with Obama through Trump, and then also into our current president, President Biden, who have seen in their president's budget uptick in funding for this. So these are important assets in the community services enterprise. Next slide. This is my final slide. It's just really intended to be a resource for this community, links to those different documents that were there and some of the things that are available in the crisis store. And that really concludes my remarks. I tried to keep my talk. Sorry if I kind of whizzed through things quickly, but I was trying to make it kind of quick and lively, which is, I know, the style of the Crisis Jam. I did see a couple questions in the comments, and I will try to respond to those. I'll dig back through and respond to those as we're listening to the rest of the updates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. Appreciate those updates. All right, I'm going to hand it right over to Dr. Brian Hepburn for the NASHPIT updates. So, Brian.
Thank you, Lindsay, and I will go quickly. I want to thank Dr. Everett and SAMHSA for their continued leadership and support, not just for 988 and crisis services, but for all the other programs that they support that make a difference to people with mental illness and substance use disorder. The segment on the Moving America's Soul on suicide, really an impressive effort. Thomas, Kevin, Ali, Justin, so on, all very articulate in the importance of the understanding of individuals with lived experience and learning from those individuals. I want to thank David Covington and RI for their continued excellence in this effort. States continue to move ahead with 988 and crisis services. It truly is a movement. All states, and as Dr. Everett was saying, the territories are also working on this 988 and crisis services. I'm an old guy. I've seen a lot of changes go on. I've never seen anything like this, where you have one single movement across all the states and territories like 988 and crisis services. Very impressive. Workforce, of course, continues to be the main problem across the states. We just need to figure this out and make sure that we are doing everything we can to recruit and retain individuals in the behavioral health space. But that, as you talk to states, they're all going to say that's the #1 problem. They have the funding, at least right now. Sustainability is an issue, but right now the funding is there. We have to do a better job with recruitment and retention. So there's a lot going on, a lot to feel good about, much to do. Thank you. Back to you, Lindsay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. I want to turn now to our Lived Lens segment, and we are joined by Ray Lay, who is here to bring that experience, that lived experience. And Ray, the question for you that we asked during this segment is, how will we know we've really arrived at the promise of 988? So would love your reflections.
Well, my reflections is real simple. A mental health response to a mental health crisis. There's no other way for it. The young lady from SAMHSA, as she stated about peers and others with lived experience being a part of that response, because it's a great thing, because law enforcement is literally out of their league trying to respond to a person with a mental health crisis who is actually very, very scared themselves, and the police can only exacerbate and aggravate that situation. So most definitely, we do need to build more upon a mental health response to a mental health crisis.
I think that's so beautifully stated, and speaks to a running theme through these Crisis Jam conversations of the intersection with between 988 and law enforcement, and how we need to really carefully think about that to get to your point of there needs to be a mental health response to a mental health crisis, not a police or criminal response. So really appreciate those reflections, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to shift it over to our Crisis Talk segment and to Stephanie Hepburn, who interviewed Heath Hayes for this article. So Stephanie.
Thank you, Lindsay. So yes, I'd like to introduce Heath Hayes. He's the Chief Communications Officer at the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Heath, you and your team developed Oklahoma's 988 communication strategy roughly 6 months before 988 launched. Can you share when in terms of timing, you set the marketing strategy in motion?
Thank you, Stephanie. And it was a pleasure talking with you, and you did such a great job capturing that. You made me sound a lot better in that article than I know that I sounded in real life. So thank you for making me sound good. I would say that even before we developed our strategy and our communication plan and really put it to market, which was about 6 months prior to, or started to develop the plan itself as execution of the media campaign 6 months before the launch of 988, about a year in advance to the launch of 988, I did a Rotary Roadshow is what I would refer to it as, all across the state, really priming all of the community about what was coming and how that was going to impact the way in which people would understand and being able to access mental health services. And so so that kind of really began a year before, but then as about 6 months before, when we started to really formalize what the media plan, the media buy, and all the strategies that you captured really well in the article, I say we started probably at Mental Health Awareness Month. So in May, we did a soft launch of the campaign strategy. And
you're talking about May 2022.
Yes, May 2022, and really started to tap into our social media influencers in that space to just have this natural conversation about what was coming and what that would mean and why it was important to them.
So honestly, the reason I reached out to you is because I heard about the Super Bowl commercial and I was just so impressed because, and we talked about the challenges from a financial perspective for a state to be able to really put forth a significantly funded launch in terms of marketing 988. So can you talk a little bit about the nuances of how that commercial came to be, how you funded the airtime, and what you were able to get with that package?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it was really just at the very beginning, brainstorming all the ideas and the ways that we could really make a big impact with getting the message out about 988. A Super Bowl was definitely one of those things that was thrown up on the board. And to really think about like who would be somebody who resonates with our population, our demographic that cuts across Oklahoma. And we, Kristen Chenoweth was one of the very first names that came up in terms of being able to really make this happen. She is well known in Oklahoma and is well known to give back to Oklahomans and is always here, being seen in a variety of different places all across the state. And so being able to just kind of use our social networks to connect with folks, to be able to get in contact with her and to realize that she was willing to do this in a way in which that was affordable to us, and to help us realize our goal of getting into the Super Bowl. There's a regional approach to buy ad space in the Super Bowl. And a lot of companies, big companies that can potentially afford, the federal or the national spots, use that strategy because they have very specific markets they want to reach. And we just use that same strategy and same approach. It was relatively cheap in comparison to the $7 million 30-second spots. Right. We spent like $70,000 and we're able to really impact the entire state. Not only did we know that because there was a lot of coverage around it because as Super Bowl commercials do, we leaked it before. And then after the fact, we see the numbers of people calling into 988 substantially increasing, almost over 50% since as a consistent rate. So it's really exciting to know that actually did make an impact the way that we were hoping it would.
And just a little bit in terms of part of that package that you put together included a 2-minute lead up from your commissioner. Can you talk about that really quickly?
Yeah, so as kind of all media buys go, you negotiate things, especially if you have a public service announcement. There are give backs that happen and expectations from media to give you one for one or things like that. But with this, as it got closer to the actual Super Bowl coverage, the spots that weren't purchased, we were able to fill those in. So the ad ended up running about 18 times, but as part of the initial negotiation, we wanted to kind of tee up what people would be seeing during the Super Bowl as our ad. And so local coverage, we filmed it was filmed, but it was filmed as though it was live and happening right then and there about the importance of 988, why people should be aware of it. So there was a little bit more context provided the pregame show when you saw it after halftime.
That's awesome. I think, it's the Super Bowl is what really sparked me to reach out to you, but in talking to you, and hopefully everybody goes to read the article and I go in depth with you about this, and the article is incorporating local influencers and what that's looked like. And the 988 Oklahoma website is really robust, but it also leads to social media and videos. Can you talk a little bit about how you incorporated PSAs with also artists in the area?
Yeah, we really approached our entire campaign as an anti-stigma campaign because our message is very clear and that we want people to reach out to 988 and use 988 even before it's a crisis. That's why we specifically branded as the mental health lifeline and versus the suicide and crisis lifeline, because in our initial research and focus groups, people were hesitant to feel safe. They were reporting that they were hesitant to reach out because of that language. And so we were intentional about that. And so when we developed the strategy around the communications about 988, we really wanted to wrap it in art and be able to visualize what that was. And so that just kind of led us down this path of, how do people express kind of some of their emotional challenges or their emotional distress, and art became a really big piece of that. So that led to the murals, that led to really kind of tapping into a whole variety of mediums of how art is expressed and how people conceptualize what that is. And it's just kind of the rest of the history. It continues to snowball as we go into our second year right now.
Yeah, it was so great. I hope everyone goes and checks out the article, and I'll just say the word payphones, search for that in the article as well. Thank you. And I'll send it back to you, Lindsay.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to turn it to Vic to take us home with his segment. So Vic. Vic, you might be on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to get myself unmuted here. I'm sorry.
No worries. Take us home. Take it away.
This week, we all heard about 16-year-old Ralph Yarl after the teen was shot and wounded when he rang the doorbell of the wrong house in Kansas City, Missouri. This is a traumatic event that we all have to carry, though I can't help but feel that as the father of Black boys, a father who has witnessed far too many young Black males experience violence, often deadly violence, a father who has to impart to his 10-year-old that he may have to have more situational awareness than an adult who may perceive him to be a threat simply because of the hue of his skin, a father who has to educate his sons that while staying out of trouble and avoiding bad neighborhoods may be all the advice some boys need, your reality is different. So my voice, my story is different. We talk about why diversity, equity, and inclusion matter in mental health resources. We talk about why we need the voice of historically marginalized communities in crafting and messaging our systems of care. We talk about why intersectionality matters. It matters because for many of us, though we live on the same soil, we experience a different America, one that we navigate differently. Thus, our voice, our story is different. April is National Minority Health Month. This year's theme, Better Health Through Better Understanding focuses on improving health outcomes for racial and ethnic minority communities and reducing health disparities. Interventions should validate and empower the client, normalize their feelings, and empathize with the unique struggles they face. We cannot ignore the impact of structural exclusion, systemic racism, and social injustice, even in our own mental health system today. Harsh words to hear, even harsher realities to live. Realities that have created a world in which Black men often feel like society does not value their lives, let alone their thoughts and feelings. When patients are provided with culturally and linguistically competent healthcare services, information, and resources, they're empowered to create healthier outcomes for themselves and their communities. When they are engaged in the visualization, formation, location, and allocation of said resources, they're empowered to create healthier outcomes for everyone. And that is strong talk.
Vic, thank you so much. I think ending us on this point of reminding us to center the experiences of marginalized individuals in this crisis work is so critical. I know we're at the end of our hour, so thank you guys so much for joining. Be sure to join us for upcoming calls around law enforcement coordination and around involving and engaging faith communities. So thank you all. Be well. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. Take care.